Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Steel News podcast. I'm Brennan alongside Jay with Steelersloyalty. Jay, it's good to be back. It's been a little while since I've podcasted, but how about them Steelers, man? Going into Atlanta, winning 18-10 against the Falcons, all off of 6 field goals. Tell me, Jay, what did you see with the Steelers on that win on Sunday?
Yeah, I thought it was a good win, and the Steelers were being slept on as usual by the professionals and the betting experts. They were underdogs going into this one,
Oh yeah.
but and then to to not have Russell Wilson start and have to move to Justin Fields on the fly, or I don't know if they were prepared for this, but I thought it was a good performance.
Yeah, and you talk about, having to have Fields go in and be QB1 even when, during the whole offseason where everyone's been told, Russ is our guy. Well, let's weld as they say nowadays. And Fields, I feel like he had a really good performance. Again, no touchdowns from that Steelers offense, but were you impressed with Fields' play, or what did you think you saw from Justin?
I thought he did enough to get the win. I mean, obviously we're going to lean on the defense, but he didn't make mistakes. He didn't kill the team. Obviously, he didn't throw any touchdowns, but there were no interceptions. But I also thought he added a dimension to the offense with his legs and his ability to run. I saw him scrambling and he made a few plays, so it just it helps the offense keep the ball more time of possession, keep the defense off the field, and let them rest.
Yeah, and you talk about what he did just enough to get the Steelers the win, and that's classic Steelers football, Good defense, hard, gritty runs, and having a quarterback that can run it seems weird as a Steelers fan. We had Big Ben for so many years, and when he was younger, obviously, he would have some splash running plays, on the goal line and whatnot, but it's really cool to see a scrambling quarterback, and definitely an improvement from last year from Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. Although I wish we could have kept Mason Rudolph, but I'm really impressed with
Mhm.
the guys we got now. But so again, we were talking about Fields, but let's go look at Russ. He had that Achilles, that calf injury. He's been kind of riding the bench, and the Steelers are comfortable with going to Fields as the hot hand. What do you think's going to happen with Russ? Do you think they're going to turn to him when he's back at 100%, or do you think they just keep riding Fields if he has a good week too?
I don't know that Fields did enough to win the starting job from week one. It was a good performance to get the win, but Tomlin said that Russ is the QB1 when he's healthy. And obviously, I don't think he's going to commit to anything right now. He's not going to show his hand because it kind of keeps other teams guessing. But I mean, because it obviously is going to depend how this next week goes too. But I
Right.
think Russ will return when he's healthy, most likely.
Yeah, and I think too it's the Steelers can utilize them both, right? Because they're both like that's definitely the best QB1, QB2 in the league without a doubt. I mean, Russ, in his prime was phenomenal, and even in Denver last year he showed some splashes of greatness, and obviously he had some struggles and whatnot, but Fields again, had a hard time in Chicago with Matt Nagy and the Bears not having the best coaching staff there. But like you were saying before, I think, Russ is a guy who can have that QB1 spot. And like Tomlin said, is their QB1. But they've been riding with Fields. And I think it's smart to not rush a quarterback back, especially a veteran that's getting older as time goes on. But so we looked at that offense. And another guy I want to mention is George Pickens. He had a big game. It was all smiles from him when he had that 41 or 40-yard reception from pass from Justin Fields. I mean, what do you think about GP's performance? And yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean he's been a big deep ball threat. I mean his average yards per catch are insane. It was insane last year, and then again this week in week one he averaged like 14 yards per catch. It was a Yeah, he's a big deep ball threat, and he even had the one taken away from him that was a little bit of a bad call I think by the official on the offensive pass interference, and
Oh
it would
yeah.
have been a hundred yard receiving game otherwise.
Yeah, and I think too it's the Steelers definitely, I think it's been rumored or maybe the con artist said or somebody said that the Steelers plan to pay George Pickens wide receiver one money when the time comes when his rookie contract expires. But, it's great to see him having a really good game. But you look at a guy like Najee Harris, he had 20 carries for around 70-ish yards. I don't have the exact stats pulled up here, but What do you think about the running game's performance between Jalen Warren and Najee Harris from that win on Sunday?
I thought it was good. It was enough to get the win. I thought the offense overall, even though they don't have a lot of touchdowns to show for it on the scoreboard, I think they did a good job controlling the ball and keeping the defense off the field and playing into the strength of the team. Um, I liked the way Najee looked. I felt like he was taking most of the carries because Warren was dealing with that hamstring injury, but
Right.
I thought the run game looked good.
Yeah, and I think, they want to give Harris that workload, right? Najee's their guy. They want to give him that workload, but again, guys like Russ, you don't want to rush him back in. Guys like Jalen Warren, it's not worth it week 1 to try to rush your starters or split running back like Jalen Warren back in the team. But you look at the Steelers offense and they had some personnel changes on the offensive line due to injuries. Isaac Samulu, I'm always bad at pronouncing his name,
Mhm.
was out, so they had Spencer Anderson play. How do you think he did, and how long do you think it will be until we get Isaac Samulu back?
I thought he did a good job filling in. I mean, obviously it hurts to lose one of your best offensive linemen, but I think the Steelers were also very fortunate that he's not out for the whole year because if he had a pectoral injury that required surgery, he'd be done. So, and that's when it's going to matter more, I think, is late in the year when the weather gets bad, the playoff window is closing, and you need to run the ball. So I think getting one of the best offensive linemen on this team back at that point will be huge for us.
Yeah, and you talk about, the injury, the pectoral injury not being as bad as it seemed, which is obviously really good for the Steelers. And, when it gets to November and December, that's when you get really gritty with the run game and the defensive showdowns and whatnot. So it'll definitely be good to see him come back into the lineup. But I want to take a shift here and turn to the defense. TJ Watt was the highest graded player by Pro Football Focus. And then second behind him was the oldest player on the team, Cameron Hayward, was the second highest graded Steelers player from the game. He was graded let me pull it up here. I think it was an 89.4 is what he was graded by Pro Football Focus. Do you have thoughts on Cam Hayward? And I know people were a little skeptical of the contract he signed, that
hmm
3-year deal. And how do you feel about all that?
I think he's looked good. Even with age, he still looked good. Even though it was an off year last year, he was dealing with injuries. But even with age, I think he still looked good. And him, Watt, Highsmith, and now having Herbig, I think the pass rush could be pretty elite this year.
Yeah, I think, going off what you're saying, the pass rush, um, it's really good. Obviously, Peyton Wilson, had that clutch tackle to prevent the touchdown. What did you see from him, in his first start in the regular season for the Steelers?
Yeah, I thought he looked good. I think it was the first drive of the game. He had a touchdown saving tackle, and the team, it seems like they're confident in him. He played, I think, roughly the same amount of snaps as Landon Roberts did. So the team has confidence in him, and I think they want to get him playing because he has some great intangible skills. He's got speed, athleticism, and all that you want at the inside linebacker position.
Yeah, and he was supposed to be a first round draft pick until I believe he tore his ACL at NC State in college. Um, and then he fell to the third round. The Steelers got him, and the Steelers always seem to find hidden gems in those later rounds on defense, especially. And I want to talk about the cornerback position. Obviously, Joey Porter Jr. is a stud and a great player, but what did you like and dislike from Dante Jackson? He had a penalty. I think it was a face mask that kind of took away a TJ Watt sack or forced fumble or something like that happened during the game. But then he had a big time play that helped the Steelers on defense. So what were your thoughts on his first game as a Steeler?
I thought overall it was a good game, and I'm happy to have him. I think some fans were critical when they traded Deontay Johnson for him, but as we've seen with Arthur Smith's offense, you don't really need a second wide receiver. His offense kind of just revolves around one guy and then spread it around, make quick reads. You've got Freiermuth, you've got a good run game. So I think having that cornerback on defense can be huge, especially for the pass rush. I mean, just to hold up an extra few seconds can be huge.
Yeah, and I think especially you look at the Panthers who lost 47-10 against the New Orleans Saints. I mean,
Hmm.
Deontay Johnson was there was a ball thrown to him and he was looking like, was that ball for me kind of look? I don't know if you saw that on Red Zone or maybe social media later on, but I feel bad for the guy. I wish he was still a Steeler, but it's great that the Steelers have, another, I believe Dante Jackson is a slot corner, if I'm not mistaken. And he does, I feel like he did a really good job in his first start for the Steelers in the regular season. So I was impressed by that. And the Steelers actually signed Terrell Edmonds back, I believe, off of the Jaguars practice squad. I know
Hmm.
he had a stint in Philly, and obviously he played a couple years here in Pittsburgh. How do you feel about bringing him back in the Berg?
I think it's good. He's familiar with the system. It's good depth. And then if you want to have three safety looks, that can also be good. And you never know later in the season if your depth's going to be tested with injury. But I do think that Deshaun Elliott it was one of the more underrated signings this offseason, and he will be the starting safety. And I think he's looked good back there. So I do think Edmonds is just kind of a depth piece and a third guy, but that depth could be good to have.
Yeah, and I mean injuries especially are what obviously can kill a team. And I think, like you were saying, depth is such a great thing. But, the Steelers, they still have a guy who won't be playing for a couple of weeks, Cameron Sutton, who will be coming back. I believe it's 6 or 8 weeks he's out due to suspension. So obviously getting him back will be huge for that defense. But I want to take a shift here and I want to look at the special teams. Cameron Johnston out for the year with an injury, obviously. And the Steelers signed Corliss Waitman, and he was on the Steelers for a brief period of time. I believe he played 1 or 2 games in 2022 or 2023. No, 2022, or maybe 2021. But how do you feel about the Steelers punter that looked really, really promising and good out for the year, and they have to sign this guy and Corliss Waitman?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks losing Cameron Johnston after it feels like they finally just found some consistency at the punting position and it only lasts 1 week. So I guess they'll have to manage and see how it goes, and hopefully Waitman does well.
Yeah, it's a big blow too because the punter can change the game for the defense, and the Steelers rely so heavily on that defense to win games. So we'll see if Waitman can definitely still carry that load and help the Steelers defense be in good positions to win the battle up front. But I also want to look here at Chris Boswell, 6 for 6 on field goals, had a 57 yarder, a 56 yarder, and I believe a 54 yarder, or maybe it was 51 yards. But he was automatic. He was
Hmm.
6 for 6, and he had a punt for 43 yards. I think he's MVP from the first game. What are your thoughts on Boswell's performance?
I would agree with you. I think he was the MVP. Um, Field goals from 56 and 57 yards, I think, and they're talking about how he's been one of the most accurate kickers ever from 50 plus yards, and right now, honestly, I'd take him over pretty much any kicker. Even Tucker right now, he hasn't looked great. So I think Boswell right now is just one of the best in the game.
Yeah, and I was surprised, Justin Tucker had that missed field goal, and Boswell right now, without a doubt, looks like the best kicker from week one. Obviously, Justin Tucker is probably the best kicker of all time, but Boswell looks really, really good. And I think that's really awesome to see. The special teams can be relied on if that offense can't get into the end zone. But I want to take a look here. Mike Tomlin is 24-6 against rookie quarterbacks. Bo Nix, a guy from Oregon, starting for the Denver Broncos, got the starting job. The Steelers travel to Denver. No Russ revenge game, unfortunately. That would have been really cool. Do you think Mike Tomlin makes that 25 wins against rookie quarterbacks? Or do you think it's like a trap game where the Steelers lose?
No, I have the Steelers winning this week, and I wasn't from what I saw in week one, I wasn't very impressed with Bo Nix, and it seemed like kind of just a desperation pick for the Broncos, just reaching because you need a quarterback in this league, otherwise you can't survive. But I mean, there's going to be growing pains, and I think right now, th- no, they're not going to beat the Steelers next week. I don't think Nick's looked good in week one at all.
Yeah, and I think, too, there was a lot of reaches in the draft. I mean, the Falcons drafting Michael Penix was very questionable. Great player, but they signed Kirk Cousins. I don't know what they were doing. I just like to bring that up. That was so weird.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, teams obviously will reach for quarterbacks. Teams are desperate. I mean, we saw how valuable backup quarterbacks last year in Joe Flacco and Jake Browning, who almost got the Bengals in the playoffs. It's such a valuable position, and the Steelers lucky to have Fields and Russ just in case one gets injured. They obviously both have two very different play styles. But I guess, in your opinion, which quarterback do you think would help this offense make the deepest playoff run this season due to their play style? In your personal opinion, not what Tomlin says, not what the media says. In your opinion, Jay, who do you got being
Mhm.
QB1 leading the Steelers to Super Bowl 7?
You know, I would say Russ, I think. Fields, he has that mobility and that's good and all, but there were moments in week one still where I think he needs to improve as a passer. And I think Russ, with that veteran experience, um, he can he can be more efficient, and that's what our offense needs, I think. We don't have like a superstar wide receiver too. You know, the Arthur Smith offense, you've got George Pickens as the wide receiver one, he's the stud, and then it's just get the ball out quick, be efficient, move the chains to whoever's open. At Freiermuth, you've got a good run game, and I think Russ and the veteran experience gives this team the best chance in the long term.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, if obviously Russ comes back, he's healthy and he plays great, keeps the position obviously like it was expected. But if he comes back and he's not playing good, and Fields has shown us promise, it kind of keeps the competition there. Who's the hot hand? If someone's not playing great, they can switch who's starting. So I think it's good to have that flexibility. And obviously Fields is great for the offensive line because the line's kind of struggled a decent bit with, in the last couple of years with blocking. I mean, Kendrick Green, Dan Moore haven't been the best. Other alignment, of course. But I think, Russ is the veteran. He's definitely a better passer. But the Steelers rely on that running game. And I think Fields it's really interesting to have Fields because you could do a lot more um, RPOs, I guess. I know, obviously, Fields isn't as good of a passer as Russ, but he's able to make plays happen and rush for the first down. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers do long term. But I think obviously they can both learn from each other, and Russ will be a great mentor for Fields. And yeah, so I guess my next thing I wanted to bring up was, the Broncos have PS2, Patrick Surtain. He's probably going to be on
Hmm.
George Pickens, the Steelers' best receiver. How do you think the Steelers get the passing game going? I mean, you have Pat Freiermuth, who the Steelers, in my opinion, don't use enough. They should definitely. He's a great blocker, but they need to utilize him in the passing game more. And they have Darnell Washington, who I would like to see them get the ball in the red zone too more because he's a big guy. I mean, he had one catch for like 5 or 6 yards, I think, in that Week 1 win. But what do you think the Steelers do in Week 2 with the passing game since PS2 will be on George Pickens?
Yeah, obviously he's an elite cornerback, one of the best in the league. And as I was saying before, we don't have that superstar wide receiver too, but it's just about being efficient, moving the chains, hitting the open guy. I think that's kind of what the Arthur Smith offense revolves around. Is just moving the chains and being efficient. You know, I- and I still think uh Pickens can make some plays. I wouldn't mind throwing it up to him deep a few times, even against one of the best in the game, just because he has that freaky athletic ability.
Yeah, and I mean George Pickens is if one of the best, if not the best, at catching the deep ball in the league. He's really good on those one-on-one routes. So if they can put the ball where it needs to be, it'll be interesting to see if he can outperform Patrick Surtain, who's obviously one of the best corners in the league, if not the best corner. So I think that'll be interesting to see. But do you have any score predictions for this upcoming game before we end this episode of this podcast? I think the Steelers are going to win, and my prediction is I think it's going to be a hard, gritty defensive game. I think the Steelers do score 2 touchdowns, though, and I think they get a couple field goals. I got the Steelers winning 20-17. I think the Broncos, do score 2 touchdowns and get a field goal. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think the Steelers will walk away with a win.
Hmm. Yeah, for my score prediction, I'll say 23-16 Steelers, but I agree with you. Definitely going to be hard-nosed defensive game again, I think. especially with Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback, and then the Steelers is just be efficient and move the ball with Fields and try and control time of possession.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what's key for the Steelers. And Jay, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start doing weekly podcasts here with Jay. We'll have episodes out every Wednesday around 1:30 ish. So make sure to stay tuned for that, and go Steelers.